We all know what it feels like to lose control. That moment when you realize someone else, a friend, a boss, a lover, is pulling the strings behind your every move. It doesn't happen with force or anger. It starts quietly, invisibly. A word here, a suggestion there. Until one day, you wake up and realize your choices are no longer yours. But here is the question that cuts deeper. How many times have you mistaken control for care, manipulation for love, and obedience for peace? Before we go further, tell me in the comments right now, where are you watching this from? And what time is it where you are? And while you're here, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because what you are about to hear may help you take back the power that someone quietly took from you. There's a story I want to tell you about a man named Daniel. On the surface, Daniel was everything society calls successful, confident, intelligent, admired. But behind closed doors, he wasn't living his own life. He was living someone else's version of it. His boss didn't just lead him, she owned him, emotionally, mentally, professionally. Every decision Daniel made came with one silent question echoing in his head. What will she think? He thought it was loyalty. He thought it was ambition. But it was control, perfectly disguised as guidance. She praised him when he obeyed. She humiliated him when he questioned her. And slowly, without realizing it, Daniel's sense of self began to erode. He wasn't making choices anymore. He was responding to commands. That's how control begins. Not with shouting or threats, but with dependence. It's not about taking your freedom by force. It's about making you hand it over willingly, believing it's for your own good. Control operates through three silent weapons: fear, guilt, and doubt. Fear makes you afraid to lose their approval or love. Guilt convinces you that saying no means you're selfish. And doubt, that's the most dangerous one. It twists your perception until you start questioning your own reality. These are the invisible threads that puppeteers pull, not with violence, but with precision. They don't need chains when they can make your own mind their prison. Think about the things people say when they want to keep control. I'm only saying this because I care. You'd be lost without me. You're overreacting. That's not what I meant. Innocent phrases, right? But these are psychological hooks. The more you hear them, the more your confidence starts to slip away, until you begin to rely on their version of events instead of your own. The cage isn't physical. It's built from invisible words, repeated until you believe them. Daniel didn't realize how deep the cage had become. He stopped applying for better jobs because she told him no one else would value him the same way. He stopped seeing his friends because she said they were distractions. He even began doubting his own memory because she often said, "That's not how it happened, Daniel." She didn't have to control his actions anymore. She had successfully rewritten his mind. And that's the terrifying beauty of psychological control. The victim starts to enforce their own captivity. But here's where it gets interesting. People who control others aren't strong. They're afraid. They don't dominate because they're powerful. They dominate because deep down, they feel powerless. Control is a mask for insecurity, for fear of abandonment, for a desperate need to feel significant. Every manipulative boss, every controlling partner, every gaslighter in your life, they all share one secret belief. If I don't control you, you'll leave me. It's tragic when you think about it. They're not monsters by nature. They're scared people using control as armor against rejection. One night, Daniel stayed late at the office again. His phone buzzed. It was his sister. Her message was simple. "When's the last time you did something just for you?" He stared at the screen for minutes. he couldn't remember. That text hit him like lightning because it reminded him that he no longer knew who he was outside her expectations. That's where change begins, not with rage or confrontation, but with realization. Control only survives in darkness. Once awareness enters the room, its grip starts to loosen. In psychology, there's a concept called cognitive liberation. It's that moment when your mind wakes up and says, "This isn't normal. This isn't fate. This is control." It's like waking up from hypnosis. You realize the bars were never real. They were beliefs you were conditioned to hold. The moment you see that truth, the spell begins to break. Awareness is rebellion in its purest form. The next morning, Daniel did something tiny, almost invisible. When his boss told him to cancel his weekend plans, he looked her in the eye and said, "I can't. I have other priorities." She froze. Then, she smiled, that dangerous, artificial smile people wear when they feel their control slipping. "Oh? So you've changed, Daniel?" He smiled back, calm, certain. "No," he said. "I just remembered who I was." That one sentence shattered years of invisible manipulation. Because control doesn't end when you confront someone. It ends when you stop surrendering the permission to be yourself. If any part of this story feels familiar, if you've ever found yourself adjusting your choices to keep someone happy, silencing your thoughts to avoid conflict, or doubting your memory after every argument, then you already know what control feels like. The good news? You've already taken the first step toward freedom, awareness. You can't break what you can't see, and now you've seen it. The truth is, control is not power. It's fear wearing confidence like a mask. The people who control are terrified of losing the illusion of superiority they've built. But the moment you see through it, their power begins to fade. It's not instant. It's not easy. But it begins with a single act of defiance, remembering who you are without their influence. Now we'll go deeper into the psychology behind these hidden tactics, the emotional strings controllers pull, how they condition loyalty, and the subtle cues they use to manipulate perception. Once you recognize these patterns, you'll never be controlled the same way again. Because the truth is, no one holds power over you unless you let them. And soon, you'll learn exactly how to take it back. Daniel thought that once he had stood up for himself, everything would change. But control doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers, like smoke after a fire. You can't see it clearly, but it's still there, seeping into every thought, every decision. And that's exactly how it works. People who control others don't fight openly. They condition you. They plant tiny seeds of self-doubt, and they wait. At first, Daniel felt free. He started going home on time, reconnecting with friends, and even smiling more often. But then, the messages started coming, subtle at first. "I noticed your work hasn't been the same lately. I hope you're not letting other people influence you. You used to be more dedicated." Every sentence was like a rope being quietly tossed around his neck, soft, harmless looking, until it tightened. That's the paradox of control. It doesn't always sound like domination. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Controllers are experts at wearing empathy like a disguise. They know exactly what you crave: validation, understanding, acceptance, and they weaponize it. They'll listen to you just enough to learn your weaknesses, then use those same vulnerabilities to keep you under their influence. They study your fears like a scientist observes a specimen. If you fear rejection, they'll threaten distance. If you crave approval, they'll make you earn it. And if you value peace, they'll bring chaos until you learn to keep quiet just to restore the calm. That's the hidden genius of psychological control. It doesn't rely on physical dominance. It relies on emotional architecture. They build your mental world for you, brick by brick, until you start seeing through their lens. It's not just, "You obey me," it's, "You believe what I believe." That's when they've truly won, when you stop questioning the narrative. Daniel didn't understand that yet. When his boss criticized him for the smallest mistake, he apologized. When she questioned his loyalty, he worked harder. It wasn't obedience, it was survival. He didn't want to lose his position, his reputation, or her approval. And that's how control thrives, not because people are weak, but because they're afraid to lose something. The controller knows this, and they never let you forget it. Have you ever met someone who always needs to be right? Someone who can twist any argument until you're the one apologizing? That's not coincidence. That's a skill. It's called gaslighting, and it's one of the oldest tactics in the controller's playbook. It's when someone makes you question your memory, your perception, even your sanity. You start asking yourself, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I am overreacting. And once that seed is planted, they never have to control you again. You'll do it to yourself. But here, as something most people don't realize, control doesn't start with manipulation. It starts with charm. The controller's first move is seduction, emotional or social. They mirror your interests, validate your opinions, make you feel seen. It's the honeymoon phase of control. You think, finally, someone who understands me. That's when they hook you, not with authority, but with connection. Because once you bond with them, your defenses fall. Daniel remembered that phase clearly. When he first started at the company, his boss had praised him constantly. "You have so much potential," she'd say. "You're different from the others." He believed her. Who wouldn't? It felt good to be chosen. But that's the trick. Controllers make you feel special, so you'll work harder to keep that feeling. Then, slowly, they start withdrawing it. They make you chase the praise that once came freely. That's how emotional dependency is built, through intermittent reinforcement. In psychology, intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful conditioning tools known to exist. It's what keeps gamblers at slot machines, checking their phones for messages, or staying in toxic relationships. You don't get rewarded every time, only sometimes. And because it's unpredictable, your brain becomes addicted to the possibility of reward. Controllers understand this instinctively. They praise you, then criticize you. They build you up, then tear you down. It's not chaos, it's control. After a few months, Daniel found himself obsessing over every interaction with her. Was she pleased? Did he do something wrong? Did she notice his effort? He was no longer working for his passion. He was working for her approval. And that's how you know control has taken root. When your actions revolve around them instead of you. Controllers often rewrite reality to fit their narrative. They isolate you by making you believe others don't understand you or that you'd too sensitive. They may even turn people against you subtly. "I'm worried about how emotional you've been lately." That one line can make your friends doubt you, while making you doubt yourself. They don't need to destroy your support system outright. They just need to contaminate it. One night, Daniel stayed awake thinking about a meeting earlier that day. She had criticized him publicly for something minor, then later told him privately, "I only do that because I believe in your potential." He smiled and nodded, but something inside him cracked. He realized her belief in him wasn't real. It was leverage, the kind that keeps you on a leash, always trying to prove yourself to someone who will never be satisfied. That's the essence of control. The bar always moves. No matter how much you do, it's never enough. Because the moment you meet their expectations, they raise them. That way, you stay chasing, never resting, never realizing that peace isn't coming. The chase is the control. But here's where Daniel's story, and yours, if you've ever lived under someone else's thumb, begins to turn. You can't fight what you don't understand, but once you see the pattern, everything starts to click. He began to notice the cycle, the praise, the criticism, the guilt, the gaslighting. It was predictable, almost mechanical. And once he saw it, it lost its magic. Control only works when it's invisible. Once you name it, it starts to die. You see, in psychology, awareness rewires power. When your mind stops reacting automatically, you create a pause, a moment of choice. That pause is everything. It's the crack in the system, the first breath of real freedom. The controller expects you to react with guilt or fear. But if you respond with calm indifference, they lose control. It's like unplugging the cord from their machine. They can still press the buttons, but nothing happens. Daniel began testing that theory. When she tried to guilt-trip him, he stayed silent. When she twisted his words, he repeated them slowly, factually. When she demanded loyalty, he smiled and said, "I'm doing my best." Nothing aggressive, nothing defiant, just neutral. And something fascinating happened. The more he stopped feeding her reactions, the more agitated she became. Her power wasn't real. It was borrowed from his emotions. And now, he was taking it back. The truth is, control doesn't survive neutrality. It thrives on emotional response, anger, fear, guilt, even tears. But when you stop playing the game, the controller's power collapses. They can't stand the silence. They'll provoke harder at first, but then they fade. Because without your reaction, they lose the fuel they depend on. And that S when you realize the most powerful truth of all. No one can control you once you stop seeking their approval. Control ends the moment validation stops being your currency. Daniel didn't confront her with rage. He didn't expose her lies to everyone in the office. He simply reclaimed his calm. That calm was louder than any argument. It said, "You no longer own my emotions." And that's the real revolution. If you're still here watching, ask yourself, who is controlling you with guilt, doubt, or fear right now? Who makes you question your reality just to keep you compliant? And more importantly, what would happen if you simply stopped reacting? Because now we'll explore how to break the cycle completely. Not just resist control, but understand why you were drawn into it in the first place. Why some people become targets, and how to rebuild your power from the inside out. Because true freedom isn't just about walking away. It's about never being chained again. Daniel had finally seen through the illusion. But seeing the truth and escaping it are two different things. The moment you start pulling away from a controller, something strange happens. They don't vanish. They tighten their grip. They sense the shift, the subtle withdrawal of energy, and it terrifies them. Because control isn't just about power, it's about fear. Their fear of being invisible, irrelevant, forgotten. That's when they start love-bombing again. Suddenly, they're kind, attentive, maybe even apologetic. "I didn't mean to push you so hard," they'll say. "You know I only want the best for you." They might offer gifts, praise, or emotional confessions, anything to make you doubt your decision to pull back. It's not affection, it's tactical empathy, a trap disguised as reconciliation. And this is the moment most people fall back in. Not because they're weak, but because their minds are wired to seek emotional balance. After all that tension and conflict, your brain craves relief. When the controller gives you that relief, even temporarily, it feels like peace. But it's not peace, it's the calm before the next storm. In psychology, This loop is known as trauma bonding. It weird sits when your emotional system becomes addicted to the highs and lows of an abusive or manipulative relationship. Every cycle of pain followed by comfort releases chemicals. Cortisol when you're stressed, dopamine when you're soothed, oxytocin when you reconnect. Your brain starts linking the abuser with relief, which makes breaking free feel like withdrawal. You're not just escaping a person, you're escaping a chemical addiction. Daniel didn't know it then, but that's exactly what he was experiencing. One moment, he hated her. The next, he missed her approval. One moment, he promised himself he'd quit. The next, he found himself trying harder to fix things. That's the hidden truth about control. It rewires your reward system. You stop chasing happiness and start chasing less pain. So why do some people attract controllers more than others? It's not chance, it's psychology. People who grew up walking on eggshells around unpredictable parents, critical teachers, or emotionally distant caregivers often learn that peace depends on keeping others happy. They become masters at reading moods, anticipating reactions, smoothing over conflict. In childhood, it was survival. In adulthood, it becomes attraction. Not consciously, but subconsciously, your brain recognizes the familiar rhythm of instability and says, "I know this dance." That's what makes control so seductive. It mirrors old wounds. It gives your inner child another chance to win love that was once conditional. But the truth is, you can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. Controllers sense that vulnerability, like sharks, smell blood. They don't always do it intentionally, but they instinctively gravitate toward people who give, because they need someone to take from. Daniel's story wasn't unique. It's the same story told 1,000 different ways, in toxic workplaces, manipulative friendships, and suffocating relationships. Each one starts with admiration, turns into dependency, and ends in confusion. And through it all, the victim keeps asking one question: why do I keep ending up here? The answer lies deep in the brain, in the amygdala, the part that governs fear and attachment. When we experience unpredictability in relationships, our brains light up with activity. The uncertainty itself becomes stimulating. The same mechanism that drives gamblers to pull the lever just one more time drives you to stay in an unhealthy dynamic, hoping this time will be different. But here is the twist most people miss. Controllers are just as trapped as the people they dominate. Their need for power comes from their own fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of insignificance. Somewhere in their past, they learned that control equals safety. If they can manage others' emotions, they never have to face their own. That's why they project. That's why they need obedience, because disobedience feels like rejection. In a strange way, they're just as addicted to the dynamic as their victims. Daniel started realizing this one late night as he sat staring at an email she'd sent, filled with subtle guilt and charm. He didn't reply. For the first time, he saw her not as a monster, but as someone broken in a different way. That realization didn't excuse her behavior, but it freed him from taking it personally. Control isn't love. It's fear in disguise. And fear, once exposed, loses its spell. So how do you break free? Not by fighting harder, but by feeling smarter, by becoming aware of the emotional hooks that keep you tethered. You begin by naming the pattern. This isn't love, this is control. Then you create distance, not necessarily physical, but emotional. You stop reacting, you stop explaining, and you stop seeking closure from the person who benefits from your confusion. It's in that silence that power begins to shift. The controller grows uneasy. They might accuse you of changing. They might call you selfish or cold. But that's just projection. They can no longer manipulate you through guilt. So they'll try to pull you back with shame. Don't take the bait. Remember, silence isn't weakness. It's a strategy. In therapy, there's a concept called self-reparenting. It means becoming the person your younger self needed: calm, protective, validating. When you do that, you stop looking for approval from the people who deny it. You stop trying to earn love from those who use it as leverage. You realize that safety doesn't come from control. It comes from boundaries. Daniel started practicing this quietly. He stopped apologizing unnecessarily. He began saying no without explanation. He stopped justifying his worth. Every small act felt like rebellion, not against her, but against his own conditioning. And little by little, the balance shifted. He no longer feared losing her approval. He feared losing himself again. And that's when everything changed. She noticed, of course. Controllers always do. They sense when their influence is slipping. Her messages grew colder, then angrier. She tried one last guilt trip. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" But Daniel no longer felt the sting. He typed one sentence in reply: "I appreciate what I've learned, but I'm moving on." He didn't wait for a response. He didn't need one. That night, he sat alone, staring at the city lights outside his apartment. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about her reaction. He was thinking about his reflection. It was quiet, uncomfortable, but real. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence, a kind of silence you have to learn to love again. You see, breaking free isn't a single act of courage. It's a process of unlearning, forgiving, and rebuilding. It's realizing that control can't survive where truth exists. Once you choose honesty with yourself, with your patterns, with your pain, no one can own you again. And maybe that's what power really is. Not the ability to control others, but the strength to stay grounded when others try to control you. If you've ever felt trapped in someone else's version of who you should be, remember this: you don't owe them peace if it costs you your freedom. Next, we'll go even deeper into how to reclaim your identity fully. How to rebuild your inner power so strong that no manipulator, narcissist, or controller can ever make you doubt yourself again. Because breaking free isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of the life you were meant to live. Daniel woke up that morning and, for the first time in years, the world felt quiet. Not empty, just quiet. The silence wasn't threatening anymore. It was like the hum before a song begins. For weeks, he'd have been learning to live without the constant push and pull of someone else's emotions. At first, it felt like withdrawal, like the absence of noise was too loud. But now, the quiet felt like a friend. It was as if his nervous system was finally learning that peace isn't boredom. It's healing. He began noticing things again: the sound of the kettle boiling, the golden hue of the morning light across his kitchen floor, the way his breath slowed down when he wasn't bracing for an attack that never came. Freedom, he realized, doesn't come with grand gestures or final showdowns. It arrives in moments so ordinary that you almost miss them. It's not about revenge, it's about release. But something strange happens after you break free from control. You start questioning everything, not out of fear, but out of awareness. You see how subtle manipulation hides in everyday life, in bosses who praise you just to extract more work, in friends who guilt you for setting boundaries, even in the little voice in your own head that says, "You're being selfish for saying no." That's when you understand control isn't just something people do to us. It's something we internalize. We become our own captors. Daniel realized that too. For so long, even after she was gone, her voice lived inside his mind. Not literally, but in the way he second-guessed every decision, apologized too quickly, and analyzed every silence. That's the final stage of control, when you start doing the work of the controller for them. That's why reclaiming power isn't about deleting someone from your life. It's about deleting the version of you that they built. He started rewriting that version piece by piece. He began journaling, not about her, but about himself. What did he want? What did he fear? What did he value when no one was watching? He wrote until the words stopped feeling like therapy and started feeling like truth. He joined a boxing class, not to fight, but to feel his strength physically again. Each punch was a reminder that his body still belonged to him. He started cooking again, playing music again. Small things, simple things, but they were his, and that made them sacred. There was one entry in his journal he returned to often. It said, "Freedom doesn't mean no one can hurt you. It means no one controls how long you stay hurt." That became his mantra, and that's when he began to understand the deepest layer of psychology behind control: the human need for certainty. Controllers crave certainty because they fear chaos, but freedom thrives in uncertainty. The moment you stop fearing the unknown, you become uncontrollable. That's when you see how control operates at every level, in relationships, in society, even within our own beliefs. Think about it. Marketing tells you what to desire. Culture tells you how to behave. Family tells you who to be. Everyone, in some form, is trying to shape your mind. But the people who rise above it are those who learn one essential skill: awareness without obedience. They listen, observe, even empathize, but they don't surrender their inner compass. That's real power. The ability to remain yourself in a world that constantly tries to rewrite you. Daniel began meeting new people again, but this time he listened differently. He no longer measured their affection by intensity, but by consistency. He no longer chased validation, he noticed energy. If someone's presence made him anxious or small, he didn't argue with it. He just left. Because growth isn't about proving your strength by staying where you're undervalued. It's about knowing when peace is worth more than permission. In one conversation with a therapist, Daniel said, "I feel like I'm learning who I am all over again." She smiled and replied, "That's not learning, that's remembering. And that's what healing really is. Not becoming someone new, but returning to who you were before control taught you to shrink." Slowly, Daniel started trusting again, not others, but himself. That trust changed everything. When you trust yourself, manipulation loses its power, because control only works through doubt. Once you stop doubting your reality, their illusion collapses. That's the essence of psychological freedom. You stop reacting and start choosing. You begin to see that not every battle is worth fighting. Sometimes power isn't about pushing back. It's about walking away without explanation. The controller's worst nightmare isn't confrontation, it's indifference. Because indifference means you're no longer emotionally available to feed their ego. You've reclaimed your energy, your narrative, your peace. And that's the final stage of liberation, when you realize you don't need closure from them. You already have it within you. The need for revenge dissolves. You stop rehearsing what you'll say if you ever see them again. You stop fantasizing about them realizing what they lost, because none of that matters anymore. You're not defined by what they did to you. You're defined by how you rebuilt after it. Daniel went back to his old cafe one evening, the same place where he'd once spent hours overanalyzing text messages and trying to decode silence. He sat by the window, ordered coffee, and watched people walk by. For a brief second, he saw someone who looked like her in the reflection of the glass. Same hair, same gait. But this time, there was no rush of adrenaline, no tightness in his chest, just calm curiosity. The ghost of control was gone. He smiled. Not a triumphant smile, a quiet one, the kind that says, "I made it out alive." And that's when he realized something profound. Freedom isn't about never being controlled again. It's about knowing that, no matter who tries, you now have the tools to see through it. You've outgrown the game, and that's where I want to leave you tonight. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt trapped by a person, a system, or even your own thoughts, remember this: control only exists where awareness doesn't. The moment you become conscious of it, you begin to weaken its hold. You don't have to fight for power. You just have to stop giving it away. You are not who they said you were. You are not the roles you were forced into. You are not small or difficult or too much. You are someone who survived being shaped by someone else's hands and still found the courage to reshape yourself. That's not just healing. That's rebirth. And before you scroll away, I want you to do one thing. Look at your hands for a moment. The same hands that once trembled under control, they now belong entirely to you. Every choice you make from this point forward is yours. No one owns you anymore. If you felt something during this story, if you've been there, or if you're still finding your way out, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what freedom means to you. I read every single one. And if you believe more people need to hear this message, hit that like button, share it with someone who might need strength tonight, and subscribe. Because the next story might just help someone else reclaim their power too.